When you have a relationship with someone that you really, really love, you want to be with them. You want to do things that make them happy. You want to be where they're at. You want to support them.
Why is it any different with God?
Yeah, you want to know him right here.
Yeah.
You want to speak to him daily.
Yeah.
You know, you want to join where he's at in fellowship, and you want to tell everyone you know about him.
Today we're going to talk about schooling, what our life was like growing up. Because interestingly, I grew up homeschooled all 12 years of my, primary education. And Jacob grew up in the public school system for all 12 years of his primary education. And so we just kind of wanted to talk through what our life experience has been like and how it's kind of been different and how we're both on the other side of that, both still in the faith. And kind of see what were some of the successes and some of the downfalls of being in each of those educational systems.
Yeah, well, and I think this kind of stems from, in one of our other videos, we started talking about education somehow. We got on a rabbit trail. And
Yeah.
so it was like, well, we literally have never talked about that because our experiences are so different.
Really
I
are.
mean, yeah, and in the fact of like, not only like where we went to school, but, you know, the state was different, how we went to school was different, everything about it was just different. Yet we're both coming together on this project that we do, and you know we both come together as one in Christ, you know, and having this faith together. So how do we get to these points?
Yeah.
So
Do you feel like, I mean, I know that the Gospel of John especially describes the relationship between us and God as being like the Lord is the one drawing us into a relationship with him. It's not really anything that we do. Do you feel like regardless of what educational system or what country or what state or whatever you grew up in, there is a certain element of the Lord drawing you in that results in you being in the faith as an adult?
Well, so I think that's part of it is, yeah, I know we're going to get into this, but and it might as well now because we're bringing it up, but there's this idea that I have to protect my children, which is good. You know, that's not a wrong idea. I definitely agree with Vodi Bakum. If you send them to Caesar, don't be mad when they come back Romans, you know, if you're not putting in the effort. But I think there's a confusion in I need to protect my children and I need to teach my children well. You know, there's a huge difference. I think a lot of homeschooling, especially the kind nowadays that's not just based off of Christian morals, it's just based off, you know, I'm scared of the government and I want my children to have nothing to do with it, which... Don't get me wrong. I understand all these things. I'm not trying to bash them, but what I'm saying is either way, whether they're at homeschool or at public school, the intent is not about protecting them. It's about properly teaching them the word properly. Because if you don't, they're going to be left to their devices. It doesn't matter if they're in the public education for however many hours or if they're at home. Kids are going to find ways to get into things like, you know, or they're going to find the other resources that point them elsewhere.
Yeah, they're either being discipled by you as a Christ follower, and therefore the Spirit of God is leading them in and drawing them in, and which is your responsibility as a parent. Or they're being discipled by Disney. Or like the systems of this world. They're being discipled somehow. It's either going to be for the Lord or against him. It's either going to be I'm going to be a disciple of Christ or I'm going to be a disciple of the world. And we know from 1 John that he who makes himself a friend of the world is an enemy of God and vice versa. The one who is a disciple of the Lord is an enemy of the world. Jesus talks about over and over again how they hated me, how much more so are they going to hate you? Because if they hate the master of the house, they're definitely going to hate the servants. And so when it comes to education, let's kind of talk through like what our experiences were like. So what was it like kind of growing up in the public school system when it as it relates to your faith?
Yeah, well, and part of this too, we have to understand that our backgrounds in faith are very different too. So it's like, we're like I say, we're complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But so like for me, I guess I'll just kind of give a little bit of my story.
Yeah.
But we were in the church when we were really young to the point I almost barely remember, the early days of it. And then after that, my family just kind of fell out of it. We really didn't have a church home. We were kind of, Creasters. We'd go Christmas, Easter, maybe.
Yeah.
My mom talked about God in the household. They're still believers. It's just, it was not a firm foundation in our house. So it was a little different in that instance. Until I was... I guess maybe 16 or 17. I was high school age, and somebody invited me to church, and I started going again and starting to see what it was like to be in church. And at that point, I kind of missed, like the whole idea of youth group and all this stuff, because all that was kind of long gone for me.
It's kind of too late.
Yeah, it was towards the end of high school, and that's kind of how my faith started. But as far as influences from school, I was thinking about this a lot as we're preparing for this video, and I can't really pinpoint any one person that had like a profound effect on me one way or the other. I gave examples of people I saw, who would demean Christ or whatever. So I saw examples of that, and I saw people who, I thought, well, maybe this person has a good faith, or I saw that they went to church regularly. I saw examples of that, but never like a real good example of like, hey, this is the way you need to go. And I think for me, looking at it now and my future children and what I would like them to do is, if they are properly studied and they are following in the Lord's will, which I'm going to do every effort in my power to make that happen. But at the same time, like once they become grown adults, like that's for them to have or not have with the Lord. And so,
but the Spirit of the Lord had his way with you.
Yes.
He'll have his way with your kids.
Well, so that being said, like I want them to be prepared to help out kids like what I was.
Yeah.
That didn't really have much church, that didn't have a good centering. It may have appeared like, yeah, he's probably a good kid. Like I was always the good kid, that like
follow the rules.
Yeah, follow the rules. Didn't want to get in trouble. I was also a sick kid, so that probably didn't help either. I mostly just wanted to go home. So I was like, whatever just gets me through the day. If that is acting right, then I'm just going to act right. Just get through the day,
Can I ask, was the guy that invited you back to church, was he from your school, or like how did you know him?
Well, so that was actually his dad was friends with my dad through work, and we were actually working at a place together.
Oh, so he's a coworker.
Yeah,
okay.
He was a coworker, but also went to school. And
Okay,
I've also known him since like middle school. So,
right.
I mean, I've known this guy a long time, but and we've been friends for a long time. But the actual inviting was through his dad inviting my dad. And so when I went to church and I saw him, of course, I'm like, my buddy, cool.
Yeah, somebody hang out with.
Yeah, somebody hang out with, and somebody my age, and the church was close, and I really liked it. I really enjoyed it, and so I started going, and I was like, yeah, this is where I need to be, and it was good for me at that time. But as far as like, again, having that super strong influence, or really, I guess it goes back to, I know we've talked about this recently, but discipleship. There was no one at that time wanting to disciple in an intentional way, and I think looking at the future, looking at, okay, what could I help prepare my kids for? It's not just discipling them, but it's also teaching them how to disciple. You know, whether they're in homeschool or public school, I think they need to learn how to look for opportunities to disciple.
Yes.
And be intentional. And I think it's so lost right now.
Oh, yeah. It's not just in the youth.
Yeah.
It's like it's very difficult to find people, first of all, who want to disciple others, and then second of all, are being discipled themselves. It should, the way that the model should look, I mean, as I understand it from the scripture, is go and make disciples and be discipled by someone further along in the faith than you, right? So, and age has nothing to do with it, might I add. It's like there could be people who are 19 who are way further along in their walk than me. And there could be people who are in their 80s who are infants in the faith. That's why you read in like Hebrews, in Hebrews like 6 and in some other later chapters, I think it's like 12, that like you should know these things. We shouldn't have to relay the foundation of faith in Christ to you. And this is like, we don't know who wrote Hebrews, but more than likely it was Paul or someone in that class of people. There were people in the church definitely older than him, It's like he's basically saying, like, you should know better at this point, and you don't. So I have to relay this groundwork again so that you get it. So all that to say, you're so right, though. If you are intentional about discipling your children when they're at home, then you don't have to homeschool them in order to protect them from the world. And maybe that's a good transition.
Well, so if I could give one thing on that, that's kind of my whole point of it is, if we are to be salt and light of the world, how can we do that if we're never around the world?
Right.
Like around worldly people.
Yeah.
And it's not protecting them from them. It should be, I love the other way Vodi Bakum puts it is, I want to create, I think he says something along the lines of ballistic missiles for Christ. It's like they are sent out and warriors for Christ, not in the I'm beating people over the head with the Bible, but they are just unafraid to share their faith.
Yeah.
They are genuine and they want to love people well.
Unapologetically Christian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's my whole point in saying that is that, my upbringing, public school, I think it was good for me in that sense of like, I wasn't really swayed one way or another. But looking forward, like I would want my children, whatever they do, whatever we have them in, that they could be that for other people, be those ballistic missiles, unapologetically Christian.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
yeah. On the other side of that,
yeah.
So that was like your public school experience.
Tell us about the weird kids.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stereotypes about homeschoolers, and not gonna lie, I was in homeschool co-op growing up, all my whole childhood, and there were some of those kids who were like the jean skirts and the bonnets and the never went outside and super socially awkward and like, yeah, those people definitely existed. And obviously, like I was young.
You weren't in a bonnet?
Like, I mean, I'm not gonna say that. No, I was churning butter out on the porch. No, no, for real though. Like there were kids like that. That stereotype exists for a reason. Yeah. It's not because everyone's like that, but like the ones that are very much like that. So. Now, I grew up homeschooled not because, at least this is as far as I understand. Mom, I know you're probably going to watch this, so I'll say this to you. As far as I understand, I was homeschooled because my parents thought that they were more capable of educating me than the public school system would have been. And they also had the means and the opportunity to. Not every family is in that situation. So this is in no way saying like you have to homeschool, otherwise you're failing your children. I'm not saying that.
Well, that's a great point. Could I just throw something in real quick? So I know we quoted Vody Bacham a lot, and again, we love Vody, but his views are more leaning towards homeschool, like heavily. I don't know if he's like they have to be homeschooled or nothing, but like very, very heavily homeschooled. And what you said was exactly right. If they are capable and able to do it, that's one thing, but a lot of people are not.
Well, but my mom was an elementary school teacher for years prior to having my sister and I. And so, like, she was well-equipped to homeschool. Yes. And then as we were growing, she obviously was growing in her ability to teach. So once we entered high school, it was more like a teach yourself with the curriculum kind of thing. So it ended up working out really well. And for my sister...
So it was more like college.
Yeah. It's basically, yeah. I actually ended up doing dual credit at a local college because... that's my mind was just able to accomplish that. Yeah. It's not every kid, and you have to be really sensitive to the needs of your child before you decide like, hey, this kid needs to be homeschooled. But like for my family, it worked out really well. We all did really well on SATs, ACTs. My sister, my brother, and I, and we all ended up pretty well-adjusted, normal people. I think I'm normal, like
kind of normal, yeah.
Well, all that to say, I grew up around tons of Christians, and in this homeschool co-op, who their parents educated them at home out of fear, because they were afraid of learning about evolution, or they were afraid of learning about like, or being bullied, or having sexual exploration, or things like that. It was this sense of like, I need to protect my kids from the world. I need to shelter them from any type of danger that the world presents them, to the point where when they were adults and they realized, oh, this is what the world is like, 90% of my friends who were my friends in high school have completely walked away from the faith at this point. And I, to be fair, I don't know them personally anymore. Like I lost touch with nearly everyone from my homeschool group. But as far as I can tell, there's a lot of people who are not only no longer practicing Christians, but they're actually anti-Christian now. And it's like, I don't know where the disconnect was with that. Like, we all grew up going to church. We all grew up in a household where the Bible was taught. We all grew up in an educational system in which the Bible was encouraged, and yet there was still this resistance to it. Yeah.
I think just seeing how sheltered kids get thrown out in the world, for me, it seems... Again, I know I'm generalizing, but it seems like there's this sheltering to the point where they don't know what a storm is.
Yeah, and it's because their parents shelter them from it.
Yeah, so much so that when they enter the world, it's just... Poof,
it's shocking.
It's shocking, yes. Yeah. And also, something else is like going through the public school system, I didn't just see like where the kids that were not wanting to follow Christ. Like, it's not that I just saw like, okay, this need to party or whatever. I didn't just see that, but I also saw the depravity behind it too. Yeah. I saw the broken homes and the broken hearts and the just wickedness of this world. And I think sometimes when you're so sheltered, all of a sudden all you see is just, the party. You don't see the brokenness behind it. You don't see all this turmoil that is actually feeding into the sin of the world, and for me, I was shown a lot of that through a lot of friendships and relationships that I had, that I saw a lot of brokenness. And so I knew I don't want this brokenness, but the brokenness is always accompanied with overwhelming amounts of sin.
And there was a long period of time in which I walked away. I wouldn't call myself, I probably would have called myself a Christian at the time, but I wasn't living like one at all for years. And then finally, when the Spirit got a hold of me, I was like, now I get it. But it took a lot of time to come back to that point. And so I just am praying for the people who I went to high school with, that they would have the same kind of experience where they would wake up,
Yeah, because I think sometimes it may come off as like we're getting a little judgmental, and I don't want to do that either. Like I know we've said this in other videos too, but just as a reminder, we've both been through it. Like we both have done things that we wish we could take back, and lived sinful lives to the extent that we didn't deserve to be able to call ourselves Christians.
No.
And so like we're not trying to say, oh, we did this schooling, so this is how it turned out. We're all perfect now. Like, no, we still had our rocky road, And
we still do.
Oh, yeah.
It's like there's still sins that we're working through even today. It's not like now that we've achieved holiness, we're perfect, we're good.
But we're also seeking Christ consistently. That one-mindedness that we talk about with pure of heart.
Yes.
We want to be one-minded towards Christ.
Absolutely.
And yes, does that mean we're going to battle sin? Yes, it's a battle. Like people that don't think it's a battle, like you don't even realize you're in a battle. That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
It is a constant struggle that we need to be fighting, and not in the sense of like just do better, but in the sense of laying it all down, humble yourself before the Lord, and asking Him to continually to do this work inside of you, and continually change your mind on things, and continually grow you spiritually. Like that's what it takes. Is
with that as well. Having this understanding and the acceptance that the Lord has given us not a spirit of fear, but one of power and love and a sound mind.
Yes.
And if those are the things that we should be holding on to as Christians, what is there in this world that we need fear? And I know that sounds really Christianese, but the genuine truth in that is, why are we afraid? Why aren't we storming the gates of hell? Why are we afraid of the world? Like obviously, if we're living as Christians, they'll hate us. Jesus promises that. That's our next Beatitudes. We're coming up on blessed are those who were persecuted for righteousness' sake. Like, because when you live the life that Christ calls blessed, the world hates it.
Yeah.
We just were talking about, you're either discipled by Christ or you're discipled by the world. So, and they are inherently opposed. The flesh hates the light and does not want to come to the light, that its works may not be exposed. And that's why it's so important for us as Christians to be leading children and our fellow man in the doctrines of Christ, in the teachings of Christ, so that we can grow more and more unafraid of the world, unafraid of evolution, unafraid of the LGBTQ community, unafraid of someone assaulting my personal bias. Like, if you build your foundation on Christ, everything else doesn't matter. You hold that like you are holding on to the only life raft left in the middle of the ocean. You hold on to Christ with everything you have. Everything else, open hand. Now, am I saying we don't stand up for righteousness? No. So please don't hear what I'm not saying. But when you feel as though the world is assaulting you, or assaulting your kids, or assaulting your existence, your God, your whole worldview, lean on Christ. Let the Spirit lead. There's something so freeing about that.
Well, and stop loving out of obligation. Like, I think that's part of it too, is people love Christ out of obligation for the moral benefit of it. And it's like, when you do that to protect your children, you're not really showing them the love of Christ, because it's all out of obligation. I go to church out of obligation. I do these things out of obligation. I act right out of obligation.
Yeah.
No. You should love Christ with all your heart, soul, and mind first, And then everything else falls into place.
Yeah.
It's easy after that.
It's easy to parent your kids when you look on Christ first.
Yeah, because then it's not you doing it. It's you letting Christ flow through you. You being the representative of Christ.
Yeah.
Because that's what we are. I mean, that's the whole idea of marriage is representing Christ in the church.
Yeah.
Right?
It's really easy to love your spouse when you let Christ's love flow through you because it's just natural. It happens just without even trying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is a level of going to Christ and asking for him to do that work within you, asking him to spark that love and starting that conversation with Christ. It is a relationship. It is not it is, there's certain aspects that are religion, but even James describes religion, and it's not what we do here in America.
No.
But it is a relationship that we have with Christ. And when you have a relationship with someone that you really, really love, you want to be with them. You want to do things that make them happy. You want to be where they're at. You want to support them. You know, that thinking about person to person. So that easily flows when you love Christ.
Why is it any different with God?
Yeah, you want to know him right here.
Yeah.
You want to speak to him daily.
Yeah.
You know, you want to join where he's at in fellowship, and you want to tell everyone you know about him.
Yes.
You want to support him.
And not out of obligation.
Yes.
Because you know what? Like, there's this amazing marriage study. It's a book by Francis and Lisa Chan. That's called You and Me Forever, right? And it's great. So please read it. But there's one chapter in which they're talking about being parents, right? And they say, you know when your parents are faking it. So you can look back on your childhood and remember the times when your parents were inauthentic with you. So don't think that you can pull one over on your kids by being inauthentic with them. They can see through that so fast. If you say you love Christ and don't actually do things that show that you love Christ, you have a dead faith. James 2, read it. These are the people who you're bringing up, that you're meant to be discipling, that God literally gave you as a blessing to grow you, to shape you, to change you, that you might reflect him more, that they might reflect him more. It's mutual. Yes, like you are training them up, but in a lot of ways, they are teaching you and showing you how much you need God. Like I'm so excited. I'm having a baby in like 2 weeks. I am so excited to be shown how selfish I am when my baby is born, you know? Because like I can see it now. Yes, like I prayed for patience, man.
Pray for humility.
Yes. No, I can see it now. I can see it being 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and her just screaming. And then me being like, oh my God, I just want to sleep. Leave me alone. Shut up, child. I can just see that. I see myself doing that now. And already I'm like, I know that that's selfish. I know this baby is helpless. They can't do anything. And this is the undying, unyielding love that Christ has for us. While we were helpless, he put aside the glory he deserved, because I don't deserve my sleep. She deserves life, you know, like we didn't deserve anything. And Christ laid aside the glory he rightfully deserved in order to reconcile us back to God. That is love, true love. And when you understand that as a parent, when you understand that as a student, when you understand that as anyone, that is when love is real.
Yes. And again, the whole idea of having children and the right thing to do with and for them, right? Because that's, we want to end on some level of like application.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we're not the ones that got it all figured out. We're not going to claim to be, but we can give our 2 cents on it and, you know, hopefully give some clarity. So again, before you even think about homeschool or public school, the first thought should be, how is my relationship with God? Am I loving him well? Am I giving Christ all my love and letting his love flow through me then?
Yeah.
You know, are you doing that in your own walk? Are you that good role model for your family? You know, husband or wife, you know, they both need to work together and be those role models. Are you in that state?
Yeah.
I think that's step one.
Well, and the other side of it, as in the same place in step one, is if you're that student and you're in a place growing up right now where your parents have put you either in homeschool or in public school, is your walk with Christ, regardless of what your parents have done, is your walk with Christ one that you can look at your fellow student and say, hey, I want to lead you to the God who loves me so much, he gave his life for me. You know, are you willing to put yourself out there and disciple as well? Because regardless of what your parents did, your walk is yours.
Oh yeah, your relationship with Christ is your relationship with Christ. You don't get into heaven because your parents went to church.
Absolutely.
Because your parents loved Christ. You know,
you got to make that decision for yourself.
Exactly.
And you're held accountable for your actions. It's not like, yes, your parents obviously helped contribute to the hand that you're dealt in life, but your decision to follow Christ is yours alone.
Oh yeah.
And so, are you loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? You know, are you leaning on the power and the everlasting arm of Jesus Christ? You know, are you relying on him for everything that you need in order to be salt and light in your school?
Yeah. And then so secondly, what is the best avenue for your children to be sent? Now that you know, okay, you know, obviously we're not going to have it perfect on this side of heaven.
No.
But you say, okay, my relationship with the Lord is solid. I'm discipling my children well, right? What is the best avenue for you? You know, because I know in certain areas of even this country, you know, I wouldn't send my kids to public school. That with the craziness that's going on, I would be afraid not just for their spiritual well-being, because I think that's covered when you're discipling them well. I'd be worried just for their safety. Yeah. Like there's just schools out there that are just so rough, and if you have the ability to homeschool, it may be an option you need to look at. But then ultimately, whatever you choose, making sure that you are ready to have them be sent out as ballistic missiles for Christ.
Amen.
And again, we've already described what that means, but understanding too that there are two sides of this coin that I kind of want to point out as well. I think I may have done it before, but I want to do it again in this video, is that, you know, one of the things that Vody points out, I know I go back to him a lot, but he's got very strong opinions, so this is kind of like my example of way over here.
Yeah.
When he talks about sending them to Caesar, don't be mad when they come back, Romans, that idea is like, okay, I have all the time to instill in them. But my argument is, if you are intentionally engaged with your children, it doesn't matter if they've got 6 hours at school and then they come home. If you're intentional, they get home. How was your day? What did you learn? How can we talk through this? Was there anything crazy that happened? You know, intentionally talk with them in a discipleship manner. Yeah. You know, they come back to you and they say, hey, this kid was getting bullied at school. I don't know what to do, Dad. You know, that's your opportunity. You open scripture and you say, hey, here's how we need to handle this for this situation. You know, and you show how to be a good disciple. And then what's so beautiful about that is if they could become peacemakers at school and use that and be salt and light into the world. And then guess what? That same bully may go, wow, I don't know what's in that kid, but he's got something figured out. Yeah. And then he wants to be discipled, and you've trained your kid how to disciple. Yeah. Now he can disciple this kid, and that's the ballistic missile. Yeah. You know, that's the being sent out in a way that truly represents Christ, not, oh, he needs to be ready to defend against gay people or whatever, like something dumb. Like, no.
Against Democrats. That's even dumber.
Yeah. Like, no. They need to be ready to love people well and show the true, humble, yet strong Christ that we follow. Yeah. Right? And which, because it takes both. It takes meekness. Meekness is the ability to create peace, because without meekness, you can't. Yeah. You know, it's being humble, but being strong at the same time. Yeah. And man, I just wish like I could just put all this into one little basket, but it's just so much there. Yeah.
Well, it's because it's your whole life. Yeah. Living the blessed life that Christ calls us to is your whole lifelong process of sanctification. It's not just a, hey, package this little morsel, just a little chew on it every day, and then you'll be the perfect Christian. That's just not how it works. It's a lifelong process.
Yeah. I guess to sum all that up is just saying discipling our children well includes teaching them how to disciple. So no matter what area you decide to go into, having them prepared is the most important thing. Yeah. I think homeschool or public school really doesn't make a whole pot of beans. It's
You're so Southern, man.
It's just coming out. I can't help it.
I'm from Chicago.
Yeah. If I get real preachy, it'll start getting real Southern.
It's like, the Lord said fire and brimstone.
I don't want none of that calf slobber.
Oh, gross.